Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a brand new story to share with you, so let's begin. My name's Mason, and for 5 years, by every outward measure, I was a happily married man, or at least that's what I believed. My wife, Claire, and I had what people around us would have called a steady, healthy marriage. We didn't have blowout fights. We showed up for each other, and our life together had the kind of ordinary comfort that feels like home. That's the point of marriage, isn't it? A partnership where two people grow, build, and trust that no matter what rolls in, they'll have each other's backs. But then the seam started to pull. At first it was so subtle I almost missed it. The kind of shift anyone could chalk up to stress, a bad week, or a mood that just needed sleep. As time moved, small quirks hardened into patterns, and the patterns turned into something I couldn't talk myself out of anymore. Claire had always been affectionate. There were days when I'd step through the door after work, and she'd meet me with a warm, lingering kiss, the kind that told me I'd been missed. Lately, what I got felt like a courtesy, tap. Fast, thin, perfunctory, like the kiss you give a distant relative at a holiday party because that's what you do. Our conversations, once easy and open, thinned out too. I'd ask how her day went and get tight, clipped replies, no warmth, no play, none of the little jokes we used to trade. It felt less like living as a couple and more like sharing a room with someone careful not to bump into anything. Then came the swings. One moment she'd be miles away behind her eyes. The next, she'd snap over nothing. I'd ask if everything was okay, if something was bothering her. "I'm fine," she'd say. Every time, the same 2 words. I'd try again. "Are you sure?" "I'm fine, Mason." The more I tried to rationalize her behavior, the more it wore at me. I kept thinking back to the early years when we'd talk until time lost track of itself, when we'd lie tangled up and whisper about our plans. We used to move like a team. Now it felt like the tide had turned, pulling her away grain by grain. So I tried harder. I set up date nights. I checked in more tenderly, more often. I took on extra little things around the house I knew she appreciated, hoping to spark something. Nothing shifted. One night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the quiet. It had been months since Claire and I had been intimate, and the not knowing why sat on me like a house. I did what a lot of lost people do, I read. Articles, advice threads, save your marriage. Nonsense, written by men who sounded as confused as I felt. One theme kept repeating: physical connection can stir emotional closeness. The logic wasn't crazy. We'd barely touched in weeks. No hugs that lingered, no playful grabs, barely even those thin goodbye pecks that arrived more out of habit than heat. So I tried simple. I reached over and gently took her hand, just a bridge, not a demand. The second my fingers touched hers, she yanked away like I'd shocked her. "Just leave me alone." Her voice was cold enough to frost glass. I rolled to my side but refused to give up. "Claire, talk to me," I said quietly. "What's wrong? Did I do something?" She lay there motionless, face turned away, body rigid like she was waiting out a storm. I touched her shoulder just to anchor the moment long enough to get words. She spun on me with a voice I'd never heard from her before, sharp, cutting. "Don't touch me. I can't stand you." The sentence hit like a steel beam to the chest. I felt my body tense, as if I'd taken a physical blow. I searched her face for anything. An apology spilling out too late. A flinch I could read as I didn't mean it, even a crack in the mask. Nothing. Just a stare that felt like I didn't belong in my own bed. My mind didn't know what to do with it. I lay back and stargazed at the ceiling in the dark, numb. For the first time since we said vows, I couldn't tell if this was fixable. I stopped asking questions, not because I didn't want answers, but because it was obvious I wouldn't get any. I felt less like a husband and more like an afterthought occupying space. So I shifted from asking to watching. I started catching little things that didn't fit who she'd always been. Claire began falling asleep in random places, at the dining table with her head on her folded arms while her laptop glowed in front of her, or on the couch mid-afternoon with her phone loose in her hand, screen dimmed. That wasn't her. Mornings, she looked wrecked even after a full night's sleep. More than once, she'd rush straight to the bathroom and I'd hear the toilet flush a few minutes later, like she'd been sick. And then the part that made me sit up. She started leaving the house more often. Claire had never been secretive. If she ran an errand, she'd say where. If she met friends, she'd tell me who. But now I'd come home and she simply wouldn't be there. No text, no note, no context. Hours later, she'd drift back in like the day hadn't happened. And when I asked where she'd been, she'd sidestep it, acting like the question itself was ridiculous. I thought about following her, but I knew I'd do it badly. So I hired someone who wouldn't, an investigator. It took a week. "We have confirmation," he said. The room got smaller. Claire was seeing someone else. Suddenly, every weird angle snapped into a straight line. I could have confronted her. I had enough to put the truth on the table and watch her squirm under the weight of it. But standing there with the answer I dreaded, I realized something else. She'd already made her choice. Nothing I asked would change what she'd done. I wasn't going to beg for love that had already been given away. She didn't deserve a scene. She deserved an end she didn't see coming. I decided right then to divorce her and to do it cleanly. One evening I left work early to grab a missing document my lawyer needed. He'd asked for it days ago, and I kept avoiding the box I knew I'd have to open. I headed straight to our bedroom and dug through my side of the closet where I keep the important paper I always promise myself to organize. After 5 minutes of flipping through folders and old bank statements, I came up empty. Maybe I'd stashed it somewhere else. Then I thought, maybe Claire tucked it in with her things by accident. That had happened before. I turned to her side of the closet and started checking. What I found knocked the air right out of me. Tucked inside a plain white envelope was a pregnancy scan. For a few seconds, my brain refused to name what my eyes were reading. Claire was pregnant. I slid the paper out with shaking hands and scanned the details. Over a month along. My heart thudded like it wanted out. She hadn't told me. I checked the date. My mind started doing math, then doing the thing minds do when the math turns into a map of questions. Was this why she'd pulled away? Why she'd snapped that night and told me she couldn't stand me? Was that disgusting look aimed at me or at the situation she was in? Then the darkest question rose like it had been waiting. Could it even be mine? This couldn't wait. I couldn't sit on it or pretend I hadn't seen it. I needed the truth now. The rest of the evening blurred. I watched the clock move without understanding what happened to the hour I'd just lost. When I heard keys in the lock, I stood up. The door swung open and Claire walked in, scrolling her phone, unaware of the weather in the room. "How long have you known you were pregnant?" The words shot out before I could wrap them in anything softer. She froze mid-step. Her body locked, her mouth opened, but nothing came. Silence stretched until she swallowed. I was preparing to tell you. "Preparing," I repeated, standing up. "Why would you need preparation to tell your husband you're pregnant? Or is the baby not mine?" There it was, the smallest hesitation. She straightened fast and grabbed a line. "Of course it's yours." I didn't believe it. "We'll do a DNA test," I said, quiet and firm. She broke. A sob tore out, jagged. "I don't know who the father is." The words weren't just a confession. They were a pronouncement over everything we'd built. Months of feeling something off, of thinking maybe I was imagining patterns, of wondering if I was the problem. None of it had prepared me for the sentence that made it all literal. I took a breath and kept my voice steady. "Get ready. The divorce papers will be ready soon." Claire dropped to her knees, crying, begging me to think, to slow down, to give her a chance to explain. I didn't care anymore. There was nothing left I needed to hear. She didn't make it easy once it all started. The tears dried and anger took the chair. She fought every step, dragging court dates, firing off motions, trying to make the entire thing feel like punishment that wouldn't end. She wanted the house and spousal support, and argued that 5 years of marriage meant she was owed. I let my lawyer do what I'd hired him for. I wasn't going to give her the fight she kept reaching for. Then came the test. When the results landed and said in clean letters that the child wasn't mine, something in the way she carried herself clicked off. No more elaborate justifications. No more speeches about what she deserved. The case moved. The court sided with me. She walked away without anything significant to hold up as a win. I don't regret leaving, not for a minute. If I had stayed, if I'd let her drag me into the pity show, I might have ended up raising another man's child inside a lie I didn't write. By the time the final signatures were done, I'd been gone in my head for months. The fights, the filings, the slow grind, everything took its cut. Months later, the rest of the story surfaced. Through mutual friends and bits that fell out onto the record during proceedings, I learned what happened after she saw that positive test. Claire went to the man she'd risked everything for. She wanted him to step up, to prove she hadn't torched our life for nothing. Maybe she pictured a clean pivot into a new family, him taking the lead, him reassuring her that she'd made the right choice. Reality didn't match the fantasy. He told her, flat, to get rid of it. He wasn't ready, didn't want the responsibility, wasn't about to rearrange his life for her. She'd built a story where leaving me was a doorway into something better. Instead, she realized she'd burned down a house and walked into an empty lot. That's when the anger curdled. She didn't aim it at herself at first. She aimed it at me because I was the safest target. That's why she became distant. That's why she couldn't meet my eyes. That's why she told me she couldn't stand me. None of that had anything to do with me. She was disgusted with herself, furious that she'd bet on a man who vanished the second things turned real. But by the time I understood this, it didn't matter anymore. I was already gone. I'm grateful I paid attention. If I'd ignored the signs, or kept telling myself that time fixes everything, I could be knee-deep in raising a child that wasn't mine, while pretending not to know the difference. That's a reality some men end up living, because they're afraid to look where their gut is pointing. Here's what I learned. If someone doesn't want you, you'll feel it. I felt it, and I listened. It's better to be divorced than to be trapped in a betrayal you're expected to call love. That's my truth. That's the lesson I won't forget. If you made it to the end, tell me, would you have handled it differently? Would you have forgiven her, or would you have done what I did and walked away because self-respect still counts? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it. And if this story resonated, hit that like button, subscribe, and send it to someone who might need to hear it today. Thanks for watching. Until next time.